Welcome to a new year. Recently, the National Brain Injury Australia Conference was held in Adelaide. This week we talked to Michele St Yves, who mysteriously acquired a brain injury, and Associate Professor Eve Valera from the US, who researches the effects of brain injury in women who have experienced partner violence.
I acquired a brain injury and I have no idea how I got it. I woke up in 2001 unable to get out of bed, and from severe constant vomiting vertigo. I'd never had vertigo before. I'd never experienced anything remotely like it, and if you've never had vertigo, it's horrendous. Really only those who've experienced it can really get the idea of it. But I ended up six weeks of bedbound vertigo, and that was the beginning of a whole journey to getting a diagnosis of an acquired brain injury. But still, even though we got the diagnosis, we don't know how it occurred.
There was no lead up to this, there was nothing. You just woke up and you had acquired a brain injury.
Yeah, well, the symptoms, yes.
So the symptoms. So then how did you get from the symptoms to the diagnosis?
Well, that was a multi-year journey of misdiagnosis. Which is common with vertigo, where if that's your primary symptom, but I also had lightning pain through my brain, and coordination issues. And I had tinnitus. I had
the ringing.
The ringing. So I got misdiagnosed with Meniere's because I met the majority of the checklist for Meniere's disease.
What can you explain what Meniere's disease is?
Meniere's disease is a inner ear condition, and the major symptoms are the ones I've just described to you. So I was sent to a lot of ear specialists for a few years.
And what did they do? Did they give you anything?
They said my hearing was great and I had no inner ear issues.
So does that cancel out Meniere's then?
Yeah, pretty much.
But they kept on diagnosing you with the Meniere's purely because you were displaying the symptoms.
That's right. Yeah. And then it got to a point where I started gathering other symptoms, such as equivalent to post-stroke symptoms. So
paralysis?
Numbness, loss of feeling in my right side, starting to drag my right side, my legs, unable to use my arm.
So you had foot drop.
Internally, I felt like the whole half of my face had melted, but I was completely normal on outside. But internally, it felt like I had post-stroke, kind of that meltdown feeling.
So were you like dragging like this?
Yes, on the inside.
Yeah.
I felt like my eyes were shut, my mouth was completely droopy. I couldn't talk yet on the outside. I was completely functional.
Bizarre.
So these things started to increase and increase. The pain then acquired sort of other types of vertigo, where I would be walking along and then suddenly the earth would drop away from me at my feet. And I felt like I was plunging through a massive sinkhole. And it would just occur out of the blue. I don't know if there's a technical term for that, but I call it a vertigo, a form of vertigo. So I started getting that.
So would you lose your balance at that point?
I would fall to the floor.
Wow.
Because I thought I was
falling
down a deep sinkhole. Yeah. So all these things started happening. So I went back to my ear specialist and went, can you please do an MRI of my brain, because it's got to do with my brain. And my GP, I got misdiagnosed thinking I had depression and, So this went on for about 4 years, 3 to 4 years. And then I just basically sent me to a neurologist. I want an MRI of my brain, and there it was. There was a subarachnoid cyst.
Can you describe what that is?
It's like a sac filled with fluid. But we have 3 layers of membranes that surround our nervous system and our brain structure. And it's called subarachnoid because the middle layer is like a very delicate spidery web material, tissue. And the inner layer is that surrounds all of our nervous system is even more delicate and fibrous. So my cyst was sitting between the innermost layer that protects and that middle arachnoid layer, which is like a spidery. But it was sitting in it was centimeters wide, filled with fluid, and it had created a kind of a crater because of its location, into my brainstem. So it was located in an area in my right cerebellopontine, which is where your pons on your brainstem meets my right cerebellum, and it was sitting in there, and it was pooling fluid and therefore pressing up against my cerebrum, my pons, my brainstem. And so I first went then I was on a specialist appointments with neurosurgeon and neurologists, and they refused to operate through the public system. So I deteriorated. I ended up losing everything.
What do you mean by that?
I lost my family, I lost my home, I lost my job, and eventually became 9 months bedbound until I had a stand-up argument with my neurologist because the public wouldn't do anything.
The public system?
The public system, because it was too risky to do anything. Then I was on my way to the US because I had read about The Brain That Changes Itself, Doig, who wrote that book. And in there was a chapter about a woman who had vertigo, had no sense of gravity. And I need to go and meet that doctor. And I was on my way via Sydney to meet another specialist. And I was on the verge of booking my tickets, spending all my divorce settlement money to try and get
answers,
because I could not continue. It was debilitating, and the helplessness was. So I thought I was going to die. So I had gone and moved to Scotland and lived with my parents to sort stuff out. And then I realised I needed to come back home because my stepdaughter was here, and my best friend and everything. And I thought, if I'm going to die, I want to be with them. So I came back. And then as things were getting worse and worse, I had a stand-up argument with my neurologist. He pretty much was just sending me out the door. And I walked back around and had a stand-up. And then as a consequence of that, he said, look, someone's just come out of semi-retirement and he's willing to see you on a private basis. And it was a neurosurgeon, and he was prepared. He saw me and he was prepared to do the surgery.
Wow.
And the day after the surgery, I was walking again.
After how long bedbound?
After 8 to 9 months, pretty much bedbound.
Wow.
Where all I was doing was crawling along the floor.
Explain what the operation was. Why did it have such a miraculous effect on you?
Well, I don't know, but he punctured. So I do know, because of the technology back then, there were things that were happening that were not shown on the scans.
Can we see what year this was when you say back then?
2009.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bladder cancer.
Yeah. So just on the scans he had about the cyst, he was, after talking to me and me being aware of the risks and the cost-benefit analysis of quality of life and risks, he felt confident with me, and so he was prepared to do it. So what he did though, he created a donut because he could not remove the structure itself. So the structure is still there, but he created a donut so the CFF, the cerebrospinal fluid, could flow and not be blocked anymore, creating greater pressure. So that was one thing he did. But then he said, when I was in there, I saw something that never was on the scans. He said 2 of your nerves had fused in, 2 of your cerebral cranial nerves had fused into the wall of the cyst.
Structure.
Yes. And he said I had to go in and shave them off, the cyst. And
so how long had they been there?
Don't know how long they'd been fused. And he goes, this explains so many of your unusual symptoms because none of that showed in the scan. And we only saw it because we went in.
So tell me, what was the structure of this cyst? What made it up?
It's just a sac. It's just a membranous sac.
And the fluid? What was the fluid?
The CFS fluid had pooled.
Ah, so that's from your brain.
So the most likely explanation is it's developmental. So it may have been there from childhood.
Wow.
And developed.
And slowly grown.
And just
slowly become more and more malignant.
It's the most logical explanation. But I've also had been thrown off a horse, like in my 20s and when I was a child. So that could have happened from traumatic impacts, and that. So we don't know, have no idea.
Okay, so this cyst was found on your cerebellum. No, what was it? Where was
Cerebellopontine angle.
Okay,
yes.
And then thereafter there was no explanation for it or anything like that.
No.
So then what did you do?
There's a lot I did, but I'll cut to a
Yes.
significant thing.
Go on.
That I did. Is I started getting my old symptoms back, but I started getting some new symptoms that I had never had before. So this was over a few years after the surgery, and I was being given no explanation for, and they started as being related to speech, but I was blitzing every speech pathologist test, and so they couldn't help me. It made no sense. And it was getting worse and worse. And my brain specialist couldn't explain what was going on. So I went to an open day at UniSA, and there was a medical science degree info session that I happened to come across. And I went in, and there was a pathway in the 2nd and 3rd year majoring in neuroanatomy and neuroscience. And I went ding, ding, ding. And I thought, I'm not going to get in because I've never done science. It's not my background. I've done no science whatsoever. I was like 40 odd years, I don't know, mid 40s, 45, 46. Yeah, really unlikely to get in. Well, I got in. I applied and got in and did a Bachelor of Medical Science with a majoring in research, but in neuroanatomy and neuroscience.
So this amazes me. So had you not had this anomaly on your brain, could you ever see yourself as being interested in science in this way? And
no.
Weren't you intimidated by the amount of work that it was going to be?
For sure. Yeah, absolutely.
But you were
my parents were both medicos. They were both a doctor and a theatre nurse. So I was used to medical language and medical, But I was a purely politics and arts, science, social sciences background. Science did not interest me in the least. But I went faced with my situation. I went, what am I good at? What capacities have I got to help myself here? How can I help myself here? Because I'm getting no help. And the answers I'm getting do not pass muster and they're not good enough. How am I going to help myself? And I went, what are you good at, Michele? And I went, you're good at learning. You're intelligent. You're good at applying what you learn. So go and find out. Go and research, because that's what you're good at. And so that's what I went and did on my own situation.
And through your study, through your investigations,
I discovered experimental research that's come out in the last 5 years. I discovered the most likely cause of what was happening with my new symptoms. And they were related to the cerebellum and new functions that would be discovered that they previously didn't believe a cerebellum conducted. And I discovered this experimental research, I don't know how, but through a lot of research and pathways, and knowing what to look for. I discovered papers that talked about symptoms that were close to what I was having, and discovered that some of these new symptoms that I had around communication were related to neural circuits and pathways related to communication and speech in the cerebellum. And I took that information to my brain specialist and said, I think this is what's going on. And she went, that sounds about right.
Was she shocked at all? Was she surprised?
Yeah, it was new research. It was new research for her, so yeah.
So new research for her, but not new research overall, or
well, it was only
fresh. It was only fresh.
It was only fresh research.
Yeah,
and because it wasn't in her such a specialty area,
wheelhouse,
yes. That I had to go. This is why I did the degree, because you do not. Specialists are just so specialized. They're just so that anything outside of, they are unlikely to look at.
Oh man, this is amazing.
So
this is amazing because
and as a result of that research, which was incredibly, I can't underestimate, and I say this to a lot of disabled friends of mine or friends who are unwell. I cannot underestimate the power of seeking and identifying a diagnosis. So even though I had a diagnosis with new symptoms, it was another exploration again and another sub-diagnosis that needed to happen because I was getting new symptoms that were not related original. So that relief and just knowing the truth about discovering that research and having it validated, for my case with my specialist, was such a relief. Not positive, but relief. But it was positive, and not only in terms of psychologically, it was positive because I knew of those neural circuits. I knew how I could hack other circuits to overcome my communication issues. Because I knew of the neuroanatomy of other pathways, I literally have over time developed kind of hacks to bypass impediments that I have.
It's mind-blowing because it almost sounds like to me that your injury is actually a moving feast. It's something that is still
dynamic.
It's dynamic. Whereas I just feel like my injury was blunt force, and then for me, I feel like the only way is up for me. Whereas for you, yours kind of like...
Well, it's a slow deterioration because I can't have surgery again.
Really?
Yeah. So, and I can already feel symptoms that are correlated to the nerves fusing back into the structure again. So
why can't you have more surgery?
It's too risky because I've already altered the structure. Because of where it's located, it's the risks are far too high. Because and that was made clear to me that if I did this, there's no further medical course of action.
So what does the future hold for you, do you think?
Managing my symptoms and just deteriorating. So it's about managing my lifestyle, managing my mental, emotional, psychological state, spirit, and being as therapeutic in my lifestyle and my physio and everything as possible to slow the rate of deterioration.
So you were an artist before you
Got
before you were...
No, I was really engaged in what you would call political lobbying.
Okay. So tell me, how did art unfurl in your life?
It's always been a part of my life. I wanted to be an artist. That's how I started out, wanted to start out. But then politics took hold and overcame the art urge. But during my sort of policy development as a political lobbyist, I worked with a lot of artists to work with marginalised communities. So that's how I kind of got involved, kept art in my life. But really what changed for me was when I was pretty much bedbound that period. The only thing I had available was about 2 hours a day where my brain was functional. And I couldn't use computers and I couldn't watch TV and I couldn't do any screen stuff at all. And all I had was a pen and paper on my lap. And I just started writing. And I discovered words to help me. And I started writing to help me process and give meaning to my 2-3 hours a day where my brain was functional.
So when you said you were writing fiction? Were you writing like a diary?
Fiction.
Or
no,
were you...
it was fiction. It was creative writing. It wasn't therapeutic. No, not fantasy. Just fictionalized, based on truth, but fictionalized truth. And then when I when I heard I was getting surgery, and I actually had my surgery, I went and when I realised that I wanted to get into writing for performance, I said I better learn the craft. So I went and enrolled at Adelaide College of Arts. And in my first year of that, I had my brain surgery.
Wow.
So I got graduated over 4 years in advanced diploma of professional writing, majoring in performance writing. And took half a year off for my brain surgery, and then got back.
Wow.
And learned the craft.
So you've headed down the path of study to initiate your...
Well, I'm a deeply curious person, and my skills are research and learning, and so I'm going to apply that to whatever faces me. I'll apply it to any situation that fronts me. They are my core skills, so that's what I'm going to apply.
They're your superpowers.
They're my superpowers that I'm going to use to help myself.
Yeah. Wow. Great.
For other people, it would be other things.
Yeah.
But
yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Michele. Well, this has been a journey.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited to hear how your craft progresses. I'm really excited to hear how your experience progresses.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for being on the show, Michele. It's been wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you.